Hello, this is Mr. Rasmussen with Algebra 1 and Lesson 119. In this particular lesson, we build off of Lesson 118 and we actually derive something called the quadratic formula. And it's used by completing the square, but then it actually skips that step, and you'll see what I'm talking about here as we get into this lesson. So the initial setup or form for the quadratic equation is going to look like this. We got ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. Okay, and then this a, b, and c correspond to some numbers, as you'll see. But first of all, we're just going to walk through the step of completing the square with this. Even though we don't have numbers to do it, we can still do the same mathematical rules, just using the variables. Okay, so our first step, this first term has to be to a power, has to be the power of, or to the x, excuse me, it has to be a lead coefficient of 1. We can't have variable there. So our first step here is actually to divide everything by a. So we're going to divide everything by a. That cancels this here. We get x squared plus b over a x plus c over a is equal to, and then 0 divided by a is still 0. Then we got to open this spot up here. We got to open this spot up here to be able to complete the square. So we're going to move that over. So we get x squared plus b over ax is equal to negative c over a. Okay, then to complete the square, we're going to take this guy here, b over a, and remember the first step is to divide him by 2. So that would be really the same thing as multiplying by 1/2, right? So let's do it that way. So now I get, if I do that, I get b over 2a. And then I want to square that, right? So if I get b over a squared, right? So that's, and we're going to put plus b squared over 2 times 2 squared is 4a squared. And then over here plus b squared over 4a squared. All right, that makes this factorable. If you remember from lesson 118, we're going to get x and then plus, and then we write what it is before we squared it. So b over 2a, like that, equals here. To be able to add these, we got to get all the parts. So the new denominator is going to be 4a squared. This one has one a, and it, but it doesn't have the 4 or the other a. So minus 4ac plus, and then the second part doesn't change. All right, so using our math there, looks like that. Okay, and then in the book they actually had the order switched for those. Okay, so we're going to square root both sides, plus or minus. That's going to remove that square. So now we have x plus b over 2a is equal to the plus or minus square root of, I'm going to switch those because that's what they have in the book. And then over here, actually, you can write it this way like this, but the square root of 4 is 2, and the square root of a squared is, well, I'll leave it there, is a, so that's actually going to reduce itself. So, next step is to get x by itself, subtract 2b over 2a from both sides. So we have x is equal to minus b over 2a plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac over top of 2a. And then you notice how these are both the same denominator, so we can actually write it, I'll rewrite again. X equal to, we can write it as minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over top of 2a. Okay, so that looks really complicated, doesn't it? Basically, we started with this form here. I'll rewrite it. ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. Started with this form. We completed the square, to get down to this. So this is the quadratic formula. And what it does for us, the use of it, is where if we put our equation in this form here, then we can then take our A, B, and C values and write them into the spots for this guy and then solve this guy without actually completing the square. Now, this seems a little bit more complicated perhaps, but when you get into deeper problems where completing the square starts to become pretty complicated, this actually simplifies it a little bit, and we use this a whole lot more in Algebra 2. So they're introducing it to you here at the end of Algebra 1. So with that being said, let's move on to example 1, where they instruct us to use the quadratic formula. So grab a new sheet of paper here. Basically, we've got a squared, our ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. And then we derived through the quadratic equation. That goes to x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over top of 2a. All right, so in example 1, they give us the equation 3x squared plus 2x minus 7 is equal to 0. And they say determine the roots by or solve by using the quadratic formula. So we could move it over and complete the square like we did. However, this is a little more complicated because you see there's a number in the front here, so we'd first have to divide everything by 3, so we'd get 2/3 and minus 7/3, and then we'd be completing the square with that and get some fractions, and this is another way to do it. Okay, so you see this lines up here. The 3 is in the A spot, the 2 is in the B spot, and this negative 7 is in the C spot. So using those values, we're going to plug them into the quadratic equation. So x is equal to negative, put the b value in, which is 2, plus or minus the square root of b value, which is 2, minus 4. We got a value, c value. A value is 3, c value is negative 7, over 2 times the a value, which is 3. So see how I took my a, b, and c values and plugged them into the end result there. So let's do some math here. This is going to be 6. This down here, negative 4 times negative 3 is negative 12. Then negative 12 times negative 7 is going to be a positive. Right, I got 12 times 7. Looks like we're going to end up with 84 for that one. So 2 squared is 4, so we get 4 plus 84 inside the square root, plus or minus negative 2 over top of 6. All right, so 84 gives me 88. Let's see if that's reducible. Square root of 88 is, right, square root of 88 reduces to 2 to the square root of 22. So, all right, so I got negative 2 plus or minus 2 square root of 22 over top of 6. I can reduce this a little bit here. Since they're both over top of 6, I can separate those out. If I separate it like that and write this under 6 as well, I can reduce those. 2 over 6 is the same as 1/3. So negative 1/3 plus or minus 1/3 the square root of 22. And this is my answer. Now you notice in the book there they separate it out. They write negative 1/3 plus 1/3 square root of 22, and then negative 1/3 minus 1/3, there we go, square root of 22 as 2 answers, but I'm fine to write it with a plus or minus, know exactly what that means as the same answer. Okay, let's look at example 2. All right, you can see how we just plugged the values in there. Example 2 says use the quadratic formula to determine the roots. It gives negative 6 is equal to negative 2x plus x. Now this one here, first we got to arrange it. It's not in this form yet. So we're going to move everything over. So we're going to get x squared. This is going to be negative x minus 6 is now equal to 0. Now it lines up. My a is equal to a 1. My b is equal to a negative 1. and my c is equal to a -6, as you can see there in my 3 spots. The ones are understood. All right, if I plug that into my quadratic equation, x is equal to -1 plus or minus the square root of -1 squared for my b value, minus 4, my a value is 1, my c value is -6, over top of 2, my a value is 1. Okay, got it all plugged in there, and now we solve. This is going to be a positive 1. This is also going to be a positive 1. This is going to be 2. This here 1 times, so it doesn't change that, so -4 times -6 looks like a positive 24. So I get 1, I'm going to separate those out. We get 1/2 plus or minus the square root of, we got 1 plus 24, 25 over 2. Square root of 25 is 5, right? So now I have this. So basically I have 1/2 plus 5 over 2 and 1/2 minus 5 over 2. So I can keep going with this one here. This gives me 6 over 2, which is an answer of 3. So 3 is an answer, and then this one here gives me -4 over 2, so which gives me an answer of -2 as my 2 answers for example number 2. All right, is that making sense a little bit there? I'll work through, well, you can look at the 3rd example in the book there. I think this is pretty clear how we set this up. Then go ahead and do both of the practice problems, and you can check your work with my work. Okay, I'm going to write the quadratic formula up on the top. So we have that to reference. We got ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0 as the first part. And that's going to give me the second part, which is x is equal to -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over top of 2a. All right, practice problems. Here we come. All right, practice A. We got 2x squared minus 3x minus 7 equals 0. So let's plug some values in. X is equal to minus a -3 for my b value, plus or minus -3 squared minus 4, a value is 2, my c value is -7, my a value is 2, well, that's 2, there we go. All right, let's start simplifying some things. Negative times a negative is positive, so 3 plus or minus this right here, -3 squared is 9. Do my math here. The negatives are going to cancel each other out to be positive, so 2 times 7 is 14, 4 times 14, or 8 times 7. Looks like I get plus 56 in there. So, all right, looks like I get square root of 65 over top of 4. Put a 4 here as well. Let's see if we can reduce my 65. Oh, looks like I can't. So, double check my work there. It looks like that is my answer. Let's look in the book here. All right. Yep. So you can write it this way, or you can leave it as plus or minus the square root of 65 over 4 this way. Either one is correct. That is our answer to practice problem A. All right, practice problem B has to get rearranged first. As we rearrange it, we're going to get 2x squared plus 3x minus 1 equals 0. All right, looks like my A is 2, my B is 3, and my C is -1. Plug some values in. We've got negative B value plus or minus, looks like 3 squared minus 4. My A value is 2, my C value -1 over top of 2 and 2. There we go. Okay, this is going to be 4, this is going to be 9 again. This here, -1 times 2 is -2, right? So -2 times 4 is, that becomes +8. So it looks like that gives me -3 plus or minus the square root of 17 over top of 4. Doesn't really look like much else can be reduced. And so that is my answer right there. Okay, feel free to contact me if you'd like some extra help with this. Have a great day.